intimate gathering of friends on this fine Sunday morning. Such a pleasure to see you all. Welcome to the Center of Love. Sylvie, if you're still online, whoever else is online, thank you for joining us via the marvels of modern technology.
Let's not mute next time.
Okay, let's not mute next time. I'll say that again. Welcome to the Center of Love once again. Thank you for being here. I have some opening words from the author of The Little Prince, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he says, "It is only with the heart that one can see clearly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." It is only with the heart that one can see clearly. Very relevant for this community of like-hearted individuals. I always have to say this. This is my disclaimer, I guess. If you're new here, or even if you've been coming here, it's a friendly reminder that we don't necessarily all think the same way. We don't necessarily believe the same things, but we commit to showing up with open hearts so that we can honor and accept everyone's truth, even when that truth doesn't necessarily align with our own. In fact, this is the work that we've been gathered here to do, is to build bridges and to create a greater understanding of the so-called other. Because I say so-called, as many of us know, there is no other. It is just the self playing these beautiful games in different costumes. So, the Center of Love, the best disorganized religion out right now, the best disorganized religion in the world. There's no better disorganized religion than the one practiced here at the Center of Love. See, organized religions, they encourage their worshipers to go and seek the light out there, or maybe up there. But this disorganized religion, we encourage worshipers to recognize who and what they, who and what you, who and what we truly are. Why would we seek the light when we are the light? And this is true at every moment. You are the light, but as we all know, things get in the way of the light. Expectations, judgments, traumas and beliefs and stories. And so what we do here as a community is we gather and we share tools and practices to help each other clear the surface so that the light can shine through and we can be beacons of love in the world. Not just every second Sunday at Scout House, but at every moment when we're out there doing the daily grind or whatever it is that you happen to do on a daily basis. So in the last few gatherings, we've talked about mind shifting, a practice to change your perspective on challenging and problematic situations and circumstances. A great way to clear the surface, open the heart, and let that light shine through. We also learned about yoga, which, as we all know now, is any practice that brings you into unity with the one, the big G, whatever you want to call them, the Tao, the logos, the mind of the universe, nature. So those are two practices to help us be those beacons of love and light in the world. And today, my friends, we are very blessed because our speaker, one of our dear members, is going to be sharing another modality, another practice to help us clear the surface and be the light. And so it's thanks to our lovely, wise, and generous speakers that we get to benefit from all of these different practices. Every week, every second week, I should say, you get a different speaker who's going to share something different with you. Sometimes it might feel like an academic lecture. Other times it's just somebody BSing like me, trying to get some laughs out of you. Other times it's about a practice, or it's about a modality, or it's about an experience. You never know what you're going to get. Everyone brings their own flavor on Sunday, and that's one of the things that I love most about this community. So today, we have an alchemist. Did you know that Tara Wilde is an alchemist? Does anybody know what alchemy is? Roughly? Like back in medieval times, they were obsessed with discovering the secret to transmuting base elements into precious elements. So they were trying to take lead and they were trying to find a way to turn that lead into gold. That is essentially the central pursuit of alchemy. Now, does anybody know, did they ever achieve this? Has anybody ever transformed lead into gold?
They did, they killed them.
Right, yeah, they didn't share the secrets. So as far as we know, it never happened. But there's another way of regarding alchemy as the transmutation of low vibrational frequencies like grief and sadness and anger, and transforming these into the gold of contentment and joy and love and gratitude. So when life gives you a big chunk of lead, as it did with you, Tara, several years ago, some of us hang on to that lead, but others discover that they are magic and they transform the tragedy, the misfortune, whatever it may be, they transform it into something beautiful, inspiring, and helpful. And there are very few individuals in this world that are capable of doing that. And we have one such individual in our midst. And I'm told that one of her secrets for transmuting lead into gold is this technique that she wants to share with us today, which is EFT tapping, emotional freedom. What does the T stand for? Techniques, thank you. Emotional freedom techniques. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, emotional freedom, sounds nice to me. We're about to learn all about it. And so once again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, Tara. Really appreciate it. And welcome to the stage.
Okay, that was awesome. Because the last time I spoke here, I got called a weirdo by Naomi. And I've graduated to alchemist.
You can be both.
Yes, you can be both. And I know I'm Naomi's favorite weirdo because she has confessed. So it's a thing. I know I took over a little bit. I think she has a lot of favorite weirdos. Anyways, I'll be an alchemist today. I am super grateful to be here. I am going to share with you about the EFT emotional freedoms technique today, which is just a healing modality, which has come forth in the world and has had the most massive impact on me and my family. Just with all of the things that we deal with in a day-to-day basis, from the deep, deep grief of losing my husband and going through the terrifying experience of his disappearance, to something as simple as my daughter having a terrifying time at the dentist all the time and not really understanding why. We use the emotional freedoms technique to help us really dig deep and figure out what needs to clear so that we can feel more gold than lead. So I am going to use my notes. It's been a while since I've described EFT. I used to do it all the time. And so I just want to make sure that I cover all the bases, but to just give you an idea of what we're going to do today, EFT is always better experienced than explained. So I am going to talk about it a little bit and just describe how it's impacted my life and how it works and where it came from. And then we're going to have an experience of it. And I'm going to guide you through what I call a global tapping situation. So when I work with people one-to-one, it's more intimate. It might bring up bigger feelings, but in a group setting, we can really borrow the benefits of just being with other people and trying it out. So if you're willing, we are going to do that in lieu of our regular quiet meditation. I'm actually going to just guide you through a few rounds of tapping and show you what it would look like. So yeah, my favorite healing practice, really. Emotional freedom techniques. Tapping is called techniques because there are many different types or many different styles. I'm certified in a method called the McDonald manifestation method, but I tap with many different mentors who all use slightly different things. But essentially, has anyone here ever tapped before? Hi, you have? Awesome, so good. So by the end of today, we will all have tapped. I think I'm going to give you a brief history of how it all came to be as well. And then I'll share some personal stories as well, just so you can see the actual impact that it can have. So I think we've all in our lives had an experience of trauma. Am I right? Some of us have had big T trauma, big things happen, like for me, the loss of my husband, even the traumatic birth of my first child. And then we've certainly all experienced like little T trauma. So Summer going to the dentist and having a really hard time with that. It's a traumatic experience, right? And no matter what happens to us in our lives, if a situation of trauma isn't handled well, if it isn't processed in the moment, it just simply stays in our body. And what it does there is it stays in our body sort of like an energy, and unconsciously we attach ideas to the trauma. So for example, I'll share with you that when I was growing up, I lived in a home where my father was very I'm going to use the word angry, an angry person. He was angry at God. He lost his dad early. He had a lot of pressure on him, like a lot of dads did in the 70s and the 80s. And he took that out abusively on my mom and my brother. And I was the youngest and the only girl. And it didn't happen to me, but it was happening in my family. And so it landed in my body as a story of, I need to make things better for my mom. I need to make things better for my brother. And you can see that that's like a helpful little soul, you know. But even now, just in my early 50s, I still carry on that trauma in my life because at the time it wasn't handled well, right? Things were swept under the rug. It was like, no, this isn't happening. And I'm sure nobody wanted me to feel like it was my fault, but I really did. And what that transpired into was me moving through my life, really never setting a boundary with my older brother. I now understand that experience to be something called survivor's guilt, where we feel bad because we were the one who didn't take the brunt of the experience. However, I did, because now I've moved through my life, having a difficult time setting boundaries with people, having a difficult time, honoring my own self, feeling like a sense of guilt around that. So that's just an example of how trauma landed in my body, and it stayed with me for a really long time. And, these things don't just manifest into ideas or stories about ourselves. It can also manifest into dis-ease or disease. Physical disease, dis-ease in the world and the way that we interact in relationships. And so, it can really affect our mental health and our emotional well-being. So if we don't process the feelings that come with the trauma, we just end up holding on to these stories, right? Often the trapped emotions that come from trauma are a really low frequency energy, right? And we're all going to feel low frequency energies at times. We all feel sadness, we all feel anger, we're supposed to, right? We're supposed to, but we need not let it sort of sit in our bodies for decades, right? And really affect the way that we move through the world. And so, when these things do land with us and they stay with us, they create a wound. And it's a wound that we don't want poked. And so as we move through the world, when people are poking our wounds, maybe unbeknownst to them, we become really triggered, right? And so when we're triggered, we try to figure a way to make ourselves feel better, right? And so this rolls into, big things like addiction, which all of us are connected to somebody who's experienced addiction. I have experienced addiction in my life. I know what that was doing. That was my body and my mind trying to protect me from the dis-ease that I felt in the world based on the trauma that I had experienced. And there's been so much incredible research around the ability that the body has to store the low frequency emotions and how it translates. So when I describe EFT to people, I describe it as a way of cleaning up my energetic house and ensuring that I'm not allowing trauma, big T or little t, to be stored in my body. So in this regard, I end up cleaning up my physical and mental houses too, right? So I often, when I describe it to new clients or groups that I'm working with, I describe it like in dental health. If we don't brush and floss, the plaque gets built up and causes disease. And it doesn't just cause disease in our teeth and our gums. It can cause all sorts of disease throughout the body, right? So EFT acts like the brush that we need to clear away the emotional plaque, the buildup, and allow our good health to take over. So the Coles notes on the history of EFT, it was just developed in the 90s by an engineer by the name of Gary Craig. He was inspired by the work of a psychologist named Roger Callahan, who had begun to experiment with adding some physical or somatic, there's that buzzword, somatic, something physical, adding a somatic component while working with his clients in classic talk therapy situations. So EFT, instead of just sitting with your therapist lying on the couch with the shrink, right? He started incorporating some physical movement into the sessions he was doing with his clients. So it's basically a mashup of somatic healing and talk therapy. It's the perfect marriage of Western philosophy, like therapy, psychology, mixed with the traditional Chinese medicine practice of acupressure. So you probably are all familiar with the fact that we have acupressure points on our body. So Callahan started using pressure on the acupressure points while he was talking through challenges with his clients. And he saw that they started to have really more honest conversations, right? So what he found that was often when a client was using their logical brain to talk out a situation, right? They'd say things like, I'm fine. Yeah, that experience doesn't really affect me anymore. I'm over it. But the body would respond to this pressure on the acupressure points in a different way. The body would release tears. The body would feel a welling up of anger. The body would start to yawn. The stomach would start to gurgle a little bit. And what was happening was the brain is a real trickster, right? You know, you go to the doctor, they go, oh, how many cigarettes do you smoke? Oh, just once in a while, you know? Or, oh, how many drinks a week do you have? Oh, I don't know, 2 or 3, right? The brain is a trickster. The brain is always trying to solve your problem for you. So sit with a psychotherapist and you'll work it out in the moment. But whether you're willing to allow yourself to actually feel those traumas that have stored, those low frequency energies that are stored in your body, your brain can talk you out of that. It can tell you you're fine, you know? So anyways, the body wouldn't allow the client to hide the trapped emotion anymore. The body wouldn't allow them to not have a physical response as they talked and basically tapped or touched the different acupressure points. This helped him really help his clients a lot more quickly. It was a lot more efficient because where we can talk for months and months and months and months about the same problem and never really get to the nitty-gritty of where it's coming from, the body won't let us do it. When it's ready, the body will show us, but we have to help it. And so the somatic component to EFT is really important. So, you know, since EFT has been discovered, there's like so many good books on how trauma is stored in the body and how it manifests. So a lot of you have probably heard of the book from Gabor Mate, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is his like phenomenal work around the connection between trauma and addiction. Also another one by, what's his name? I wrote it down here because it's hard to remember. Bessel van der Kolk, called The Body Keeps the Score. Right? We hear stories all the time of how the body's able to compartmentalize things that have happened to us. War veterans seeing horrific scenes in their life when they're overseas, coming back and living lives of depression and addiction. That is the perfect example of stored, trapped trauma. Or somebody, if you've ever seen I'm listening to Sally Field's book right now on Audible, and she won an award for her role in the movie Sybil, which, is anyone familiar with that movie? Yeah. It's like unbelievable. A true story about a person with multiple personality disorder. So this is another way where the body can store trauma and compartmentalize the different experiences that this person has had and actually become multitudes of different personalities. So crazy. But if we could get our mind and our body working together, we can do really cool things. So just to share a couple of personal experiences. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, I had never tapped before. I'd never been an EFT tapper. I was at a kind of a convention situation for my business, which was in pure essential oils, medicinal grade essential oils. So nothing to do with tapping, nothing to do, but we had this big group of like 350 people and there was many speakers there. And the first speaker of the morning was a girl called Amy. And Amy came up and she was telling us a story about building her business, because this is a direct sales business. She was talking about building her business and she was looking at her lifestyle and she was like, I don't consider myself an alcoholic, but I do notice that every day at 6 o'clock, gotta pour myself that wine, gotta have that reward. And she said, as I continue to build my business, I feel a little bit stuck. And I asked myself the question, what if that's the one thing that's getting in the way? And I thought, that's funny because Amy and me are really similar. I needed my reward. I needed to like push pause on the stress of the day at 6 o'clock. And I often drank a glass of wine and I often drank more like 3 or 4 on occasion. And yeah, sure, I wasn't falling over in a ditch somewhere, and I wasn't getting in a car drunk with my kids or anything, but like something was holding me back. I continued to think about that conversation that Amy bravely shared with everybody throughout the course of the day. And then in the afternoon, I've been thinking about that all day. What if it's the one thing that's getting in my way? And then a woman stepped onto the stage and her name was Laura Parkinson. And I knew her from afar, but she was not my friend. And she led this group of 350 people through a global tapping session. Very simple. I think the topic was like, maybe we were talking about something, we're not talking about big T trauma here. We're all sitting in this massive group and we're just going to have an experience of moving energy through our bodies and learn how to tap. And as we were tapping, I didn't feel like crying, but all of a sudden my tears just started to come out of my eyes. Like I was just like, sort of like not sobbing because I wasn't like weeping, but like I just couldn't stop crying. Something was happening in my body. And I didn't know what, but I knew it felt good because it felt like a release. And I went home that night and I was about to go to a play with my husband and my mom, and we were going to dinner. And of course, time came for a glass of wine. And I thought, I don't know. I think that might be the one thing that's getting in my way. And I never had a drink for 4 years after that. And it's my understanding that on that day, I had an idea here that made sense logically. But when I tapped it in, because it was first and foremost in my mind, when I tapped it in with Laura, somehow it really landed. And I cleared and I made space for something new. And like, you have no idea how that set me up for success in my life moving forward. Without knowing what was to come, it was incredibly important for me to be connected and clear-minded as I moved through my life with my 2 children by ourselves. So that was a big thing. And then the biggest thing was in September 2020, many of you know, not everybody knows, but many of you know that my husband left the home one day and didn't come home. And there was a 9-day period of time where I was sat on my couch, not knowing where this most devoted husband of mine was. And it was a chaotic time and it was a frantic time. And my body felt frantic and my nervous system was. At this time, that friend Laura, who was a stranger when I first tapped in my sobriety, came to me and said, I want to help you. I want to tap with you. And I said, okay, I'm going to do anything. I really want to do anything. And by this time I'd started a bit of a practice of tapping, so I understood it better. And what ended up happening was Laura actually got her friend Sophie, who is wildly intuitive EFT tapping mentor and psychic, to tap with me because she was a little bit more removed from the situation. She was a little less emotionally invested at that time. And she tapped with me 12 to 15 times a day. She called me from where she was in Quebec, and I would sit on my couch and she'd say, what's on your mind now, Tara? And I'd be like, I just don't know. I feel like, and then she'd be like, okay, here we go to the top of the head. And we would just start tapping, and whoever was in the room with me would just start tapping, and we would just move this energy through my body. I can feel it in my body right now. And I did that 12 to 15 times a day for probably the whole first 2 weeks until a search was complete and we knew that we could presume that Darcy was gone. And when I came to a point where I was able to go into regular talk therapy again and start with a counselor with my kids and everything, everyone just was like, it's amazing that you have processed as much as you have processed. at this time. And I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that there are little T traumas in my life that never got dealt with that affect me way more than this biggest of T traumas, because I processed it and I worked with it and I moved it out of my body so it didn't get trapped. And I didn't reach for a bottle and I didn't stay in bed under the covers. I tried to turn the lead into gold right away. And I had gratitude because I had space for it, you know? And so this is all a very dramatic way of describing a modality that can also be used for like the simplest things, right? Just to create a mind shift like Dre did with us a couple of sessions ago.